And with us right now, we've got Lee Sammartino. Lee, you're the CEO of Ikonic Tonic. I like the name.
I am. Thank you very much.
The website is iconictonic.com. It's IKONIC Tonic, TONIC.com. And we got a lot to talk about, but I want to start off for those who are watching our interview on YouTube right now. You can see Lee behind you got a drum kit. And so we were talking before we started recording, and Lee, could share us a little bit about your drum experience.
I started drumming from an very early age, 7 years old. I was in love with Motley Crue, and Tommy Lee, I wanted to be just like him. And so my parents bought me a drum kit, and I really never looked back. I started playing in bands when I was 12 years old, really got into hard rock and metal in the high school years. Gigged all around Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, where I grew up. And then in college, we were in a Pantera tribute band. And, it's kind of funny because we actually got paid really well to tour as a tribute band versus now it's, the money's not there. And, had some of the greatest experiences of my life, toured out to, Chicago, down south, on the East Coast, played all over the Northeast. We actually used to play a lot with Stained, which is, a huge band before they were actually Stained, before they were found by Limp Bizkit. We were actually at that show when that whole entire thing happened and transpired. So it was kind of, that's where I started was, drums, recording artist, engineer, really found fascination in music and never looked back, 47 years old, and I wouldn't have changed anything for the world.
Can I ask if you're doing a tribute band, can Pantera say, hey, you can't do that?
So it's kind of funny. ASCAP and BMI have, in order to play live music at a club, you have to have a cabaret license. And basically ASCAP and BMI cover that. And in that fund that is paid into that for the cabaret license, that money has to go towards ASCAP and BMI, and then it's equally distributed out amongst the bands. Naturally, you can't claim it as your own music. YouTube has various regulations with regards to, if you're covering a song, you can't monetize it and things along those lines. So, those things didn't exist back then. You're going back almost 30 years. It's quite some time ago. Not as young as I used to be.
But was there ever any communication between you and Pantera?
So it's funny, we met them and we're actually on their tour bus in Hartford, Connecticut. Great story and great guys. I mean, legitimately some of the nicest guys we've ever met. Unfortunately, Dime and Vinnie Paul, the drummer, two brothers, they're passed on now. But legitimately just great guys. And so we met them in Hartford. We told them, hey, we're huge fans, Pantera tribute band. Well, they went on tour with the first Ozfest. And so we played up in the Northeast, wherever they played. We would show up for the radio promotions the day beforehand, and we would play with a band called Believer, which was an Ozzy tribute. And so, everything was packed. We played like 2,000 person venues in Boston, Connecticut, Rhode Island. It was huge. It was almost like we were the band. So it was pretty insane. It was cool.
Yeah. I talked with, there's a band that comes around here in Orlando every year, plays at Epcot. And I had the opportunity to chat with the guy who plays Bono. And so as I said, so have you ever had any connection with U2? He goes, believe it or not, somehow they found out we were playing in town while they were there. And of course, we went to their show afterwards. And he actually gave them a shout out from the stage.
Really?
And of course, U2, a giant stadium kind of situation. He goes, I will never have a moment like that in my life. Again, that was just, such an honor. So, okay. So you go from Pantera cover band. So you're now the CEO and founder of Ikonic Tonic. Tell me about what Ikonic Tonic does.
So we're a brand agency that bridges the human connection between brands and their consumers. And it's every single touch point, whether it's technology, marketing, design. We've designed store environments for retail, hospitality environments. We've built them out. We've done all the graphic design, signage, mobile applications. In 2008, when the retail economy dropped out, I realized, that there had to be a significant shift from what I was doing, specifically concentrating just on retail. And more open up the broad focus, especially with the advent of mobile applications. The iPhone had just been released a year earlier. Android was starting to make its push. And, we started seeing the writing on the walls that the true omnichannel experience was going to be very real in a very short amount of time. And, I had always been a data guy, and I had always followed the trends and where things were going. So in the early days, we became an iOS developer early on. We really kind of created it from a technology foundation and really truly understanding what the consumer experience looked like in that space, and then how it transcended the physical space. So a lot of what we do is we try to understand the consumer behavior and help our clients with how the consumer interacts with their brand on the one side in the physical space and in person, and then ensure that that brand aligns and the voice aligns over on the digital space as well.
Yeah. So you, Lee, you guys have worked with some big clients, Home Depot, Apple, I see Hay House, Lowe's, Luxottica. How did you get seen by these? How did you get connected with such big brands, and how did you win that business?
So it was kind of funny. When I first got out of college, I moved to California. Didn't really want to work. Started skydiving when I was in college and moved to Southern California, where it's just sunny all the time. And so I started skydiving. We put on an event, and the event, we were looking for sponsors, and we ended up partnering with the Extreme Sports Channel out of the UK. They happened to be launching a 24/7 channel inside of the United States, which ultimately became Fuel TV. And I ended up getting a job with them. So that was my first job out of college. So I was exposed, right out of college and kind of thrown to the wolves, big advertisers. We were working with NASCAR, we were working with Pepsi, Coca-Cola, we were working with the big brands and the big agencies for a lot of the events and the programming that we're doing around the globe. And so grew myself through, for 3 years with them. And once we were supposed to do a joint venture deal with Fox, and it was going to be 24/7 Action Sports Network. And they didn't end up coming to terms, and Fox ended up launching Fuel. I was offered a job with Fuel, but I didn't want to move to Los Angeles. And that was basically the hitch point of whether I had the position or not. So I stayed in San Diego and assumed that I'd be able to stay in entertainment, which everybody that knows in entertainment, it just doesn't really exist in San Diego.
Yeah,
there's a hard divide south of anything south of Long Beach, and even some of Long Beach. So it was difficult. I couldn't find a job. So I kind of reverted back to what I knew, which was I knew sound engineering. I knew that I could make an okay living. It allowed me to skydive during the day. I could work all night, doing gigs, rigging, and things on those lines. And then things started to get real. I had to actually kind of buckle down and become somewhat of a sensible adult. And ended up, I was on a boat with a friend, and there was a gentleman who had a retail construction and installation company. And I had a background in construction and development because my parents were developers back in Connecticut when I was growing up. So I understood, construction, running projects. So he hired me on. And that was my first foray into retail. I didn't even know this was even an industry. I didn't understand that, the people in the stores that were building stuff and putting products on shelves and merchandising, I didn't know that those weren't actually, Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart's personnel, but an external company would send them in specifically on behalf of the brand. So that was my first foray into retail. And then because of my construction background, I started building out stores and started managing national projects. And, fast forward, I started consulting on my own. And then 2008, everything was very successful. We all saw the economy take a serious downturn. And when that downturn happened, I had really good operational skills, really good management and logistical skills, but I didn't really have any hands-on skills. So I found myself in kind of a weird position where the only thing I had known for the last 8 years was retail. And when that was no longer there, the jobs weren't there, retailers weren't hiring, the companies that were still in existence weren't doing a whole lot of work. I had to reinvent myself again. And that's where Ikonic Tonic came from. I had always had a background in really kind of understanding what the brand was trying to do in their space. And so I understood where technology was going. So I went back to school and, put myself through every coding course, design course, graphic arts course. I learned, instead of just understanding what the design teams could do, I learned how to design. At that point in time, it wasn't the Adobe Creative Cloud, it was Creative Suite. I learned After Effects, I learned production, I learned everything I possibly could for every touch point that would affect the consumer from a hands-on perspective, because I always knew what could be done. I just never really knew how to do it myself. So I rolled up my sleeves and then founded Ikonic Tonic. And ever since then, we kind of never looked back.
So you talk a lot about human connection, which is actually, it's one of our core values. But if I want to be cognizant of human connection in my branding, in my social, on my website, in our sales, like what sort of filter would I look at everything that we do? How can we increase that connection with the audience that we want to serve?
Well, it's truly understanding your actual audience, their behaviors, how they shop. Listen, the data's out there, the research is out there. You just have to buckle down and do it. But even more critical than that is understanding if you are trying to be a generational agnostic product, in other words, you're targeting 14 to 74, 84, whatever it might be, you have to understand that the way that you're marketing to each one of those groups is completely different. Different places. I just had this conversation the other day with a client. He wanted to run the same campaigns across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and you really can't do that. And the reason is because the campaign that you're running on, he happens to run a application for kickers, for punters, kickers in the NFL, and he's a thought leader within that space. And he's mainly targeting parents. And I told him, you have to target the parents on the Facebook. If you're trying to get the kids on the application, that's what you have to do on Facebook. But you have to be, the cool kid actually being hands-on and doing it on Instagram with kind of that hybrid to the parents that are watching it because they are on Instagram. But the TikTok is a completely different paradigm from the other two. That is specifically for kids. And you're marketing to those, youth generations in a specific way that you wouldn't target those parents over at Facebook. So, it's really, that's the first thing, is really understanding, your audience, understanding the demographics, understanding how they interact with brands, what they shop for, what their belief systems are, culture, ideologies, and it's really digging deep from a behavioral aspect of it and truly understanding what they are at the core. Be authentic, be you, but understand how your authenticity relates to them, your audience and your customers.
Yeah. So another thing, 2020 is kind of an unusual year to say the least. What would you recommend, just kind of given the, maybe some of the divisiveness that we've seen culturally, of course, and then, the fact that I think consumers have grown a bunch of new sensitivities as a result of our current and foreseeable future, at least for some time, some of the things that, again, how our culture has completely changed.
For me, I have a hard, fast rule with myself. I don't talk politics and I don't talk religion in business.
Right.
I think if we follow those two rules, your divisiveness is going to be kept to a minimum. I think approaching situations from a perspective of, understand who you're speaking with. And listen, we all have our problems. We all have our insecurities. We all have our deficiencies. We have our likes, our dislikes. And I think it's selfish from us to presume that we're in the right and that somebody else is in the wrong. So I'm always a huge proponent of learning the other person. Listen, at the end of the day, 99% of the time, we're probably all in agreement on most things. And it just seems to be that 1% of the time that blows up relationships. And that's kind of a really hard thing. So when I try to approach things, I don't approach it from a political standpoint. Very agnostic when I talk things. I keep it business. And that's how I like to approach it. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to have a common goal. And, anytime you introduce either one of those topics into the conversation, 50% of the time, as we've seen, it's going to impact somebody on some side of the divide.
Yeah. One thing that you suggest as well is always be thinking 3 steps ahead. How do we apply that?
So, that's a funny thing. Back in 2008, I had never thought 3 steps ahead. I didn't look. And when that came down, I didn't know what to do. I had my daughter was just born. I had a toddler son. The world came collapsing down in an instant. 6 months isn't necessarily a long time, but it's not a short time either. But it seemed like overnight. And I think, honestly, looking forward, a lot of what I do, on a daily basis is I follow market trends, and I follow market trends that happen to influence what we do and how it affects our clients. So when this happened, yes, it affected a lot of our business. We lost, obviously, our retail business. We lost, restaurant companies we were working with and restaurant groups. A lot of that changed, but what we were able to do is refocus our efforts on where we knew the business was going to be, biotech, pharma, technology, entertainment, production. There was going to be things that we're going to be able to do. Now, production took its own shift because, nobody's filming in Hollywood anymore. You have to keep socially distanced, but that doesn't mean production in the capacity like you and I are doing actually stopped. We were able to, and I'm sure you've seen probably even more of an explosive growth because people are now looking for content. So, you have an upswell. My wife is a publicist. People started reading books again. Her authors that, that had, 5-10-year-old books are now coming back out of the woodwork and reinvigorating themselves. So there's certain industries that, though they're not insulated, they're more insulated than industries like hospitality, retail, and things where, socially distancing and the actual pandemic had adversely affected. So
awesome.
I would say, honestly, just always be aware of the market forces, always be prepared in case something like this, something as catastrophic as this is unprecedented, obviously, but be sure you're prepared, that there's another direction, whether it's your business, your product, perfect example, my wife's hairdresser. She ended up packaging up color kits for all of her clients. She wasn't going to be able to see them. So she thought outside of the box, and a lot of colorists started doing that. The ones that saw a major impact were the ones that didn't think enough in advance to realize that this was going to adversely affect their business. And they are where they are at this point.
Excellent. All right, Lee Sammartino. So again, your website is Ikonic Tonic. That's Iconic with a K, tonic with a C.com. Anything else that people are like, I like this. I like this Lee guy. Where do they go from here?
I'm on LinkedIn, professionally. They can visit our website. They can engage with me. I always, it's hard. The way we're positioned a lot of the times is, we're not really positioned to help the small business that is literally at a foundational level where they're not really sure, they're in an exploratory side of it. It's more along the lines of the small business that has just launched and is looking to grow all the way through, the enterprise. And they can reach out to us at any time. And we love to work with people. We love helping people. And even if they're not at that point, I just had a gentleman up in LA reach out to us. He was starting a secondhand car dealership, and that's not really where we lie, but I gave him all the resources, connections that he could go to. I always like to answer people to try to help them along because, number one, you never know where they're going to go with their business and when I can actually help them and where they fit in with our business model and we fit in with theirs. And then number two, it's, karma. It comes back to you.
For sure. All right, Lee Sammartino, again, founder and CEO of Ikonic Tonic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.